Welcome, curious soul. Tonight, we unearth tales best left buried, stories whispered in shadows. Make yourself comfortable, but keep one eye on the door. You never know what might come knocking. Our next tale drifts to the quiet village of Little Bramble, where a puppet theater appeared overnight without a word, and with it came a lesson no child would ever forget. When the old puppet theater arrived in Little Bramble, it set up quietly overnight in the village square. No posters, no announcements, just a modest wooden stage draped in faded velvet curtains. By morning, children whispered excitedly, drawn by the mystery of it. Their parents allowed them to gather, grateful for distraction during the long school break. At noon, the curtains slowly parted, revealing puppets crafted beautifully from polished wood, their faces painted in cheerful smiles, their eyes bright glass beads that caught the sunlight strangely. The children clapped as the puppets began to dance and sing, operated by invisible hands. The village was small and such amusements rare. But among the delighted spectators, a few children grew restless. Jack Miller began throwing stones at the stage, laughing loudly when one puppet stumbled, its string twisting awkwardly. Abigail Price shrieked and mocked the wooden performers, pulling faces, jeering louder with each dance. The puppets paused, heads turning in unison toward the disruptive children, wooden eyes clicking audibly in their sockets. Silence fell abruptly over the gathered crowd. Slowly, deliberately, the lead puppet, a tall, finely dressed figure with painted rosy cheeks and a wooden grin, stepped forward, dangling precariously on strings that seemed too thin to support its weight. "Children should be polite," it said gently, voice soft but edged with something colder beneath. "Rudeness will not go unnoticed." The parents laughed uneasily, dismissing the threat as part of the act. The children merely jeered louder, but the puppet's painted smile remained fixed, and the glass eyes gleamed with a strange, angry light. When the performance ended, the villagers dispersed, chuckling nervously at the unusual display. Only the disruptive children lingered, mocking, kicking the stage, pulling at the worn curtains. The puppets hung lifelessly now, faces turned away. But their eyes watched carefully in the afternoon shadows. Night fell slowly. Street lamps flickered to life, casting amber pools along cobbled roads. Jack Miller lay in bed, drifting towards sleep, unaware of the faint tapping sound outside his window. It was rhythmic, wooden, patient. His bedroom door creaked open, just a sliver. Jack turned sleepily, thinking it was his mother, but standing in the doorway was the puppet from the show, taller now, elongated, strings floating upward into impossible darkness above. "We warned you," it whispered softly, wooden lips clicking gently. Jack tried to scream, but no sound came. Wooden fingers reached forward, thin and smooth, pressing against his mouth, holding his cries inside. Across the village, Abigail Price woke to the sound of tiny feet scurrying beneath her bed. When she peered into the shadows, two small wooden puppets stared back at her with painted eyes that reflected moonlight, wide and malicious. They smiled identically, carved mouths splitting impossibly wider, sharp and splintered. "Rude little children must be taught," one giggled softly. Abigail scrambled backwards, tangled in her blankets, tumbling from bed onto a cold, unfamiliar wooden floor. She looked up to find she was now inside the puppet theater, the velvet curtains closed, surrounding her in musty darkness. Thin strings dangled silently from high above, swaying as if waiting. The strings descended slowly, attaching themselves gently to Abigail's wrists, ankles, neck, piercing painlessly but deeply, fusing seamlessly into her flesh. She felt her limbs twitch, then rise. She tried to scream, but a carved smile was forming on her lips, voice trapped deep inside as she danced silently, helplessly, under invisible hands. Morning came quietly to Little Bramble. The villagers returned to find the puppet theater gone, leaving only a bare patch in the grass and a lingering sense of unease. Jack and Abigail were never seen again. Their parents searched desperately, shouting their names into empty fields and quiet streets. Weeks later, miles away, in another small village, a puppet theater appeared quietly overnight. As curious children gathered at noon, the curtains parted slowly. Among the performers were two new puppets, painted brightly, exquisitely carved, their wooden smiles perfect, and their eyes wide with fear. And as the children laughed, the new puppets danced helplessly, forever bound by invisible strings, forever teaching others the lesson they themselves failed to learn. Our next tale begins with Dean, who late one night discovered a strange podcast buried deep in the search results. A show no one had made, with hosts no one should ever hear. It was late when Dean stumbled upon the podcast. He'd been idly scrolling through his phone, tired eyes scanning lists of endless, repetitive shows, when he noticed one strangely titled episode at the bottom of the search results. One more for the road. The thumbnail showed an empty highway illuminated by streetlights, mist curling at its edges. Curious, Dean tapped to play. Static hissed softly, giving way to silence. Then came two voices, low, conversational, oddly captivating in their calm. "It's busy out tonight," the first voice murmured, smooth yet unnervingly flat. "Lots of people, but none quite right." "We'll find one soon enough," replied the second, softer, colder. "We always do." Dean frowned slightly, puzzled. The episode had no listens, no description, no creator listed. Yet he found himself unable to stop listening, each word drawing him deeper into their strange dialogue. "Remember the last one?" The first voice chuckled softly. "How they screamed when they realized what was happening." The second laughed quietly. The look of terror. They always think they're safe until it's far too late. Unease prickled Dean's skin. The conversation grew darker, more detailed. The hosts discussing calmly how they'd approach their next victim, describing cruel, precise acts that made Dean's stomach twist painfully. "Enough," he muttered, finger tapping the screen. But the podcast kept playing. He tapped again, still nothing. Dean pressed the power button repeatedly, panic swelling. The phone wouldn't respond. Their voices grew louder, more eager, describing vividly how their victims' pleas would go unanswered, drowned by passing traffic. Breath ragged, Dean grabbed the baseball bat leaning near his bedroom door and swung it furiously into the phone, the screen shattering, the podcast crackling wildly, but still playing. The hosts laughed, amused now, their sinister amusement echoing through the speaker. Finally, after repeated blows, the phone fell silent, sparks flickering briefly. Dean slumped to the floor, heart hammering painfully in his chest. He stared at the broken phone, shaking his head with forced laughter, trying to steady himself. Great, now I've got to buy a new phone. A sharp knock on the front door shattered the silence. Dean froze. It was late, too late for visitors. His pulse quickened again, throat tightening. He moved cautiously downstairs, bat still gripped tightly, breath coming in short bursts. The knocking came again, louder this time. Dean reached the door, peering anxiously through the peephole. Nothing, just an empty porch bathed in the weak glow of the street lamp. Dean exhaled slowly, stepping back. Then, impossibly, the shattered phone flickered back to life in his hand. The podcast resumed, voices soft, mocking. "Joining us now is our special guest," whispered the first host. Dean's blood turned cold. A quiet footstep creaked on the floorboards directly behind him. "Any last words?" the second voice purred, amused. Dean began to turn slowly, heart pounding painfully in his ears. But before he could face whatever waited behind him, he felt an icy hand clamp tightly onto his shoulder. "Welcome to the show," the voices whispered together, and Dean's scream was swiftly silenced by the static hiss of the podcast, now forever awaiting its next listener. The stories are over, for now. But don't get too comfortable. All stories begin somewhere, and the next one might start with you.